Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about our medical book publishing program at CUP and the processes involved in publishing a successful book. So I'm Catherine Barnes, I'm the Executive Publisher for Medical Books at the Press. Later you'll be hearing from my colleagues, Nick Dunton, who's our publisher, and Anna Whiting, who's our Senior Commissioning Editor. So I'll go on to the next slide, please. So our medical books team. We are a team of 5 commissioning editors acquiring new books across a number of clinical specialties, which you can see before you. So I'm responsible for the psychiatry, psychopharmacology program, which has a particular focus on Dr Stahl's publishing portfolio, which I hope you're familiar with. I also acquire in anaesthesia, critical care and emergency medicine, and I'm currently investigating a new publishing program in pain medicine because it's particularly complements anaesthesia. Nick Dunton, who's here today, is our publisher for obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive medicine, for overseeing our partnership with the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology as well. And Anna Whiting, who's here today as well, is our senior commissioning editor for the brain and behavioural sciences, particularly focused on neurology and clinical neuroscience. And she's currently investigating a new program in public health and epidemiology, particularly as it's very research focused, so particularly relevant for graduate students. Then we have Sarah Marsh, who is an editor responsible for clinical psychology, neuropsychology and pathology. And then Jessica Patworth, who's our commissioning editor, who manages the partnership with the Royal College of Psychiatrists. So just moving on to the next slide, a little bit about Cambridge University Press. The Cambridge story really began in 1534 when Henry VIII allowed the press to print all manner of books. Cambridge published its first book in 1584, which actually makes it the oldest publishing house in the world. Over the next 4 centuries, the press's reputation spread throughout Europe based on excellence in scholarly publishing of academic texts, poetry, school books, prayer books and Bibles. Today, Cambridge is a global publisher. We have over 50 offices worldwide. CUP employs over 2,000 people, publishing over 50,000 titles by authors from 100 countries. And it's still growing, bringing thousands of subjects and millions of ideas to the world. So a little bit about our medical publishing in general. So the medical books department is, we sit within the academic division. We work very closely with our colleagues in journals. The field of medicine comprises around 65 specialties. So CUP, we are very focused. We focus within 10 core specialties, which I outlined in the previous slide. So we're a small medical book publisher. However, we really pack a punch in our core areas. So compared to our competitors, we're really leading in these fields, particularly within psychiatry and mental health. And this area really represents our largest list. It's around 45 to 50% of our entire program. So we publish around 75 to 80 books, titles a year, and we with aggressive commissioning plans that we have in place, we're aiming to publish around 120 medical books a year. We have key standout partnerships, most notably with Dr Stahl, who I'll speak a little bit about later, and his Neuroscience Education Institute based in San Diego, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and then the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So what do we publish is the next slide. Our markets are academic and professional. So we publish the majority of books we publish are contributed, they're very international, they're often clinically focused, and they're aimed at really helping healthcare professionals carry out their day-to-day work and prepare and revise for qualifications. So you can see on the slide that it's very varied, and right through to the academic trade, self-help books, which is a small part of what we do, but actually is growing, and particularly through what's happening with COVID-19 and lockdown, we're seeing more and more need for these kind of books as well. We're also looking at developing more textbooks for graduate students, as well as continuing to do the kind of specialist research monographs and technical books as well. So I'll pass over to Anna now, who's going to give you a bit of background on how do we go about finding the right books to publish.
Hi, lovely to speak to you all today. So really the course that we take to find the right books is that we largely talk to academics and practitioners. So most of the research that we're doing, particularly at the moment, I'm researching into new areas, is to go out to the field and talk to the people in the know about what they're doing and what would benefit them and the people that they're working with in terms of book publishing. We find these people through desk research, telephone calls at the moment, and certainly a lot of Zoom calls. But in previous life, we would have gone to any number of academic and technical conferences and met people there. We also work with people that are known to us. So we have series editors and advisors and returning authors. So quite often we're lucky enough to strike up really great relationships with our authors and editors who then come back to us with new ideas for books. We'll scan the literature to identify gaps in the market or areas where something could be done better. We'll explore publishing partnerships. As we've said, we work with the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists and the Royal College of Psychiatrists, as well as the Neuroscience Education Institute with Dr Stahl's work. We on occasion receive ad hoc submissions from people suggesting titles who come to us based on our reputation. And we also, as a team, work to undertake various strategy days to really look at what we're doing, look at where our growth potential is, and using that strategic planning to commission new and fresh approaches to identified topics. Medicine's unusual in that we don't have that many people coming to us to write books. Because journal publishing is where medics mainly earn their credit, book writing can be a drain on what's already precious time. So the people that we work with tend to be the people who really want to convey their knowledge. They do it for the love of writing and presenting information in new and innovative ways, particularly in Dr. Stahl's case. Clinicians are often too busy to keep up with research that's fast-paced and often confusing, especially with there being such a wealth of information available at their fingertips. So our role is to work with the right people in order to curate content that can help busy clinicians understand how research can influence them and their practice, and help junior medics to expand their knowledge. Our focus is really to look for new and fresh approaches to topics. It's rare to find a book with no competition, unless, for example, there's a new exam to prepare for. But what we can do is look to find new angles and new approaches or ways in which to help readers learn. And a lot of that has to do with the presentation of quality content. We've got here an image of what's known as the Syndicate of the Press. This is a group made up of representatives of departments of the wider university. And it's their role to really be at the end of a review process that each publication goes through. They represent our commitment to quality standards, which pervades everything that we do. When we receive a proposal from authors or editors who've been working on a specific idea with us, we'll send it to reviewers who are representative of the target market. And we'll send that feedback on to authors and editors and ask them to respond to reviewer comments and make changes to their proposal as they see fit. That final proposal will then go to a meeting of our colleagues within the press, in our editorial sales and marketing teams. And then it will go to the Syndicate of the Press for the final stamp of approval to offer a contract. Moving on to the next slide, how do we select proposals to take forward? So when we start working with our authors, we ask them to complete a book proposal, and it should feature a clear rationale for the book, a table of contents with a sentence outlining the crux of each chapter and any contributor details if appropriate, an idea of a clear and specific target audience, commentary on how the book provides something for the market over and above what's currently available. So quite often people will come to us saying that they have a book that's unrivaled in the market. And what I'll ask of them is to suggest to us what the readers of their proposed book would go to now. What resources would they approach now with this book not being available to approximate what it does? And why do those resources fall short of what's intended? We'll ask for a mini biography of each author or editor, and sample material if the book is from a single author or is intended to be published for a trade audience, a wide public audience. as I've outlined, once we've received a comprehensive proposal, we'll send it out to reviewers, and the most constructive comments come from reviewers who get a good sense of what the proposal is going to be, what the book will be about, rather than having to infer what the authors or the editors are trying to achieve, which is why we ask authors and editors to give as much information as possible in their proposal, and we'll only be able to move forward if we get 3 supportive reviews as a minimum. I'll hand over to Nick now.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, so why do people write for Cambridge University Press? The chief factor, I think, is the brand strength of the university itself, which is consistently in the top 5 universities worldwide for research and education. I think we're currently listed at number 3, behind some place called Oxford, not sure where that is, and Caltech. We are a not-for-profit organisation. CUP does aim to make a surplus on our business, but that money goes back into the university to fund further research and education. So there are no greedy shareholders milking the company for profit. I think you'll find that many academic publishers have cut the quality of their content. For example, they've stopped copy editing text, they use poorer paper and reduced printing quality. This is something we haven't done. We think it's very important for medical books that quality is maintained, particularly in things like reproducing x-rays and using color illustrations for pathology books, where it's important for diagnosis. We include our authors and editors in key decision-making throughout the publishing process, for example, on the choice of cover illustrations and marketing strategy. We have a global reach for sales and marketing. As Catherine mentioned, we have offices in more than 50 countries worldwide, and we publish authors from over 100 countries worldwide. We're a very stable company. Again, as Catherine said, we've been in business since the middle of the 16th century, and we have no plans to be going anywhere anytime soon. Arising from that not-for-profit status, we can make pricing decisions based on market factors. For example, price sensitivity in different geographical markets, rather than on a standard formulaic basis. I think this is really appreciated by our authors. We have a digital publishing strategy, which is equally as good as any of the other major STM publishers. All our content is simultaneously published in print and digital media. Cambridge Core is a market-leading library portal, and we work with a number of third-party retailers to produce ebooks, for example, Amazon, Kindle, and Apple iBooks. We also publish a lot of supplementary digital content to support our products, e.g. videos of surgical operations. So we have a true multimedia approach to medical publishing. And we're increasingly working with content suppliers on open access book projects to broaden the accessibility and reach of our products. Okay, can we move on? So this slide really just shows a montage of covers of some of our leading strategic assets. And we'll be talking about most of these in a bit more detail later on. So there's a mix here of definitive text reference works, practitioner textbooks, course manuals, and increasingly we're doing trade-oriented books where our subject expertise and access to top authors gives us a market advantage. I think this slide also stresses the point that we take care on our cover designs, unlike some of our competitors who use a one color suits all approach. Next slide. Okay, so as Catherine says, mental health and clinical neurosciences is really the standout area for us. And Catherine and Anna will be talking more about this in a moment, particularly our star author, Dr. Stahl. Again, as has been mentioned, our status as a not-for-profit university press has enabled us to establish publishing partnerships with 2 of the UK Royal Colleges. And these are bodies that look after the education and professional training in the UK, but they're not just UK focused, they have reach into many areas of the world. So those are important so So in summary, we focus on those specialties where we have expertise, a critical mass of titles, significant strategic assets, and market expertise. And I think it's important to stress that medicine is both an academic and a professional subject. So a $300 text reference may equally be purchased by a university library or by an office practitioner wanting to improve his or her service to their patients. Okay.
Thank you. So just a few of our core areas explained. And the first one moving on to is mental health. As I said earlier, the field of mental health within our publishing program makes up about 45 to 50% of our total revenue. So it's the largest area in which we publish. This has primarily been led by our publishing program with Dr. Stahl, who is moving into his 25th year of publishing with us. His publishing is very biological, so it's biological drug-based psychiatry. So what we have tried to do with the overall mental health program is to make it more fully rounded. So what we did is we brought in a commissioning editor to cover clinical psychology, so the therapeutic end. So it means that our program is more all-rounded. So from the drug area through to therapeutics. And also we partner now with, or we have been in partnership with a couple of years now with the Royal College of Psychiatrists to produce their books, but we also publish their journals as well. This is a great collaboration for us, and it's really helped us sort of foment our position with the UK, particularly psychiatry market. Our mental health program is targeted at all levels of the market. So not only the psychiatrists and the clinical psychologists, but we have big markets amongst specialist mental health nurses, social workers, and counsellors, for example. And what we're always really looking to do is to continue to develop and keep on top of the core hot topics within this field. And we do that by attending the key areas or the key conferences in this area, where we have quite a significant presence, particularly at meetings such as APA, the American Psychiatric Association meeting. So just moving on to give you a bit of background about Dr. Stahl. So psychopharmacology, apart from being a big word, is also a big specialty within psychiatry. It's the major subspecialty within the field. And it's about the use of drugs to alleviate the symptoms of mental disorders such as depression, schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, and so forth. So anyone who treats a patient with psychotropic or tropic medications is called a psychopharmacologist. And Dr. Stahl is an internationally recognized clinical psychiatrist and a leader in the field of psychopharmacology. So just moving on to the next slide, I put together some sort of key facts about our Stahl publishing program. So as mentioned before, we've been publishing next year, actually, it's 25-year anniversary of publishing Dr. Stahl's books. And it started with his theoretical textbook, Essential Psychopharmacology. And the 5th edition of that book is due to come out in early May next year. That was followed by the Prescriber's Guide, which publishes next month in its 7th edition. And then that was followed by the Illustrated Guides, which came out shortly afterwards. So we have 30 titles in print, a journal, 30 Stahl titles in print, a journal, an online product, and an app. His program has sold over 2 million copies worldwide. So Dr. Stahl's portfolio is really the kind of jewel in the crown of our medical publishing program. And this slide shows you the various streams. So the Stahl brand is really a household name in psychopharmacology due to the fact that Dr. Stahl is an exceptional teacher. He produces best-selling, high-quality, winning copyrights. And the way he does that, he's a genius in medical education, because what he's able to do is take a very complex subject such as psychopharmacology and break it down for the visual learner in order so that they can understand it in a simplistic way. And that's what really makes him so popular. So we have within the Stahl stream, we have the textbooks, we have the prescriber's guides, we have the illustrated guides, we have the new series of Stahl's handbooks, which we published the clozapine handbook last year, and clozapine being a major drug used for the treatment of schizophrenia. And we're due to publish another title in that series next year on drug plasma and psychiatric therapeutics. And we also have Stahl Online, which is the online home for the majority of Dr. Stahl's titles. It launched in 2008. It was relaunched in 2015. It's available to purchase by institutions and individuals as an annual subscription. It's fully searchable across all content and across an individual title with quick drug lookup. And it also has continuing medical education accreditation alongside it. So alongside our Stahl brand, just moving on to the next slide, is the Royal College of Psychiatrists, the partnership that I made reference to earlier. The overarching aim of the college's work in books is to publish the work of eminent psychiatrists who are closely affiliated with the college, who are the main governing body in the UK. We publish their titles that are aligned with the college's priorities, so reflecting, for example, the integration of neuroscience into the trainee curriculum. We have a new book coming out actually with Dr. Stahl involved in that book too. And also it's very important to bring out books with the college that are aimed at trainees, so their requirements of the new curriculum and training exams. And also they're invested in really trying to attract medical students into the field of psychiatry. And on this slide, just to point out a couple of the books, one of them in particular is the My Mummy and Me, which was a kind of fun book for us to work on. It's intended for children whose mothers may be suffering from postnatal mental health conditions. And also Dracula for Doctors was a slightly different book for the press to do, but has actually been doing really well for us, and it explores the representations of mental health in Gothic literature. So just moving on to the next slide. So clinical psychology, as I mentioned, is the therapeutic end of what we do compared to Dr. Stahl's biological end. At the moment, it's a smaller part of the current mental health list, but it has considerable scope for expansion. Alongside biological psychiatry, the programme really helps us to become more sort of fully rounded in mental health. And with everything that's happening within the world at the moment, and you only need to sort of turn on the news to see the impact that COVID-19 is having on people's mental health, this is where clinical psychology really comes to bear, because with e-health, people are able to have their sort of therapies delivered to them through video as well. So there's lots of sort of interesting ways in which we can support our books through video content as well. A new title, just recently published trade title here, is Dr. Markey's Body Image for Girls, which seeks to tackle body dissatisfaction by helping young girls aged 9 to 15 to develop and maintain a positive body image. The book's highly illustrated, it's printed in colour, full colour. It's written in a very familiar, easy to read style, covering issues such as nutrition, body changes and puberty, beauty ideals, media, social media, and exercise. I'll now pass over to Anna to tell you a bit about our neurology programme.
Sorry, I'd muted myself because my son and daughter just came home from school. So we've got quite a broad coverage of most neurology subspecialties. Increasingly, neurologists are specialising in areas. There are relatively few general neurologists, although there is a push towards increasing how many neurologists work across a broad spectrum of conditions. We have titles, particular strengths in stroke medicine, movement disorders, epilepsy, neuropsychiatry and neurorehabilitation. We've got really strong collaborations with key names in the field, such as Dr. Lou Kaplan for stroke, Professor Simon Chauvan in epilepsy, and Dr. Alberto Espe in movement disorders. We aim to publish books that cover any number of those people that are involved with the treatment of neurological conditions. So that may be neurologists, neurosurgeons, neuroscientists, neuropharmacologists, neurorehabilitation practitioners, and any healthcare professionals that touch on the treatment of neurological conditions. We have a number of successful book series, such as Pearls and Pitfalls, Common Pitfalls, and behavioural neurology titles. We have a successful case studies series. We know that it's quite common that case studies aren't typically well cited in journals, and they're becoming they're coming away from journals. So because they don't contribute towards a journal's impact factor, increasingly they're not published. But they are still a huge resource for medics and those training to become medics. And so these case studies books are really important to those people. So we have quite a strong list of titles in case studies. We're looking to commission more aggressively in clinical neuroscience to explore publishing books that show how neuroscience can be applied to treat neurological or psychiatric diseases. So then moving on to the next slide. This is a book that I'm really excited by. It published quite recently and is by the chap that I mentioned on the last slide, Alberto Espay. And in this book, he's collaborated with a chap called Ben Stetcher, who's a patient advocate for Parkinson's disease. Alberto had interviewed him for his website, and the two came to find that they had such a synergy in the way that they were thinking in what Ben understood to be happening in the field and the way that Alberto's research was moving, that they decided to come together to put together this book that really explains how, as you see here, we know so much about Parkinson's, but so little about people with Parkinson's. It's a really innovative book that looks to provoke, and the authors want to fundamentally change the research process into Parkinson's disease, which they think isn't getting anywhere in the way it's currently ordered. So it's about seeking a long-term solution to the problem of Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders. It's particularly fascinating to work with authors that are representative of the patient group. Ben's really engaged and he's engaging as well. And that means that the book has a resonance that it might not otherwise have had, given his involvement in the book. So I'll hand over to Nick now to tell you a little bit more about the obstetrics and gynecology list.
Okay, so we are market leaders in 3 major areas of obstetrics and gynecology, which are maternal fetal medicine, obstetrics, and reproductive medicine. And I wanted to highlight really reproductive medicine because that's a very good example of a professional subject. It really didn't exist 40 years ago before the first IVF baby was born, but it's grown in that time into a multi-billion dollar international business. So most of our book sales in that specialty will be very professional. So they're selling to individual physicians as well as fertility clinic. Both of them are buying the books to improve their competitive advantage. As we've mentioned a couple of times, we have a strategic partnership with the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which is based in London, but has an international reach. And that gives us first mover advantage in developing new textbooks for their examinations. Most of our books in the OBGYN list tend to be relatively short, paperback, practical manuals, which answer the sort of questions that come up in day-to-day practice. It's something I always say to my authors, you need to be able to address questions like, how do I treat a patient that presents with? So they're very practical, very pragmatic books. And if we can go on to the next slide, I'm just going to quickly talk about a couple of our leading brands. So the first one is PROMPT, which stands for Practical Obstetric Multi-Professional Training. Now, these are basically manuals for teams of obstetricians, midwives, and anesthesiologists on how to deal with emergency situations during labor and birth. They're interesting because, really because of medical malpractice insurance. The payouts for medical malpractice and obstetrics equal the payouts for the entirety of the rest of medicine put together. And because of this, obstetricians have to pay huge insurance premiums. So prompt training has been shown to have significant impact on improving outcomes for mothers and babies. And it's actively supported by a lot of medical insurance companies as a way of reducing their payouts. Prompt is widely adopted around the world, and we're increasingly producing geographically adapted versions. For example, we've done separate editions for the USA and Canada, a separate one for Australia. We've published a German language edition of the prompt manual, and we have, we hope, in train editions for China and a Spanish translation as well. Okay, so if we can go on to the next one. The next one is high-risk pregnancy. Now, this is the 5th edition of this market-leading gold standard book. And this really focuses on problems throughout pregnancy as well as at delivery. It's edited and written by some of the top obstetricians in the world. And for this edition, we also produced a dynamic online version where new research and practice recommendations could be added in real time. So every chapter in the book is reviewed once a year and updates are added to the website. And a good example of how that works really well are things like Zika virus and COVID-19 infections in pregnancy, neither of which existed or nobody had heard of them when the print book was published back in 2017. And because of these litigation problems that I mentioned earlier, it's essential that obstetricians can demonstrate they are familiar with all the latest research if they happen to get something wrong and get sued for malpractice. So this product, High Risk Pregnancy, with its online content, does just that. Okay, thanks.
So we're now opening the floor to questions, and I think we have our first question from Beatriz Ayala from the National Institute of Respiratory Diseases in Mexico City. So, what titles do we have about respiratory diseases like asthma, tuberculosis, and or where can she find more information about that subject area?
So respiratory medicine isn't a core area in which we publish. So we certainly have titles, but it's not a list that we're developing a huge amount at the moment. But obviously, given everything that's going on at the moment, there's certain core topics that we've picked up. So just to give you kind of a couple of titles that we publish, we have, for example, on Nick's list, I think he has a respiratory disease in pregnancy title. And then in our kind of emergency medicine area, we have a core topics on airway management. I'm working on a title on breathlessness at the moment. So we don't specifically have titles, for example, on asthma, only because that's one of the kind of 65 medical specialties that we don't focus on directly, but certainly our core areas will pick up. So, I mean, asthma's obviously a core area in which we might do more of a trade title on, but not, specifically one aimed at respiratory physicians.
Right, thank you. No problem, Betty. So I don't know if you want to open your microphones as well and ask directly, that is also okay. So si quieren abrir su micrófono y hacer alguna pregunta directamente que tenga que ver con lo que se ha expuesto o una pregunta más abierta, podemos hacerla ya sea en inglés o en español. You can ask your question either in English or in Spanish. Whatever works best for you. So, are there any more questions? It seems people are being shy today.
They're overwhelmed with information.
Right.
Sergio, did you have any questions? Anything you didn't think we brought out enough, or anything we could expand on?
Yeah, I think there's a few areas. For example, what would you recommend to librarians, to medical librarians, so they can engage more effectively with their community? Is there anything that, from your perspective as editors, that you think would be of help to them?
Isn't it that one?
Did that come through?
How do you mean, Sergio?
So, for example, when your authors are sending you manuscripts or are working with you, are there any concerns that they usually have, or things that they talk with you about the best way to promote their books, for example, or to work together with other partners to be able to do that more effectively? And
so we have a marketing team who work with our authors quite closely to understand the best places that we could promote the book, be that through journal book reviews or interviews that authors might do, be that through promoting it via our blog that we have, or through promotion at conferences, so finding the right conferences to approach. And we always ask all of our authors and editors and contributors to a book to recommend the book to their librarians as well.